Okay.
What's up, guys?
Hello.
We are the Air Fresheners.
Episode 2. You made it.
Episode 2. I'm Steven.
I'm Kristina, and I'm already drinking.
Anyways.
I feel like that's perfect,
Yeah,
honestly.
that was great. This
I'm
wine's
Kristina.
really good.
If you don't know that by now, then watch the last 2 episodes.
Yeah. They're good episodes.
Yeah, they're pretty good. So what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to talk about spirituality.
We're getting deep.
This will be the beginning of our spirituality conversation.
Which is kind of a lot of pressure, because I think we're going to talk about some, pretty traumatizing things sometimes. And we actually had dinner with a good friend of mine, a month ago, and she made us realize that, if there's certain types of PTSD you have around, I don't know, a lot of these things that we're talking about, I think we need to maybe warn people that this could be a trigger conversation, because we're trying to make this I didn't mean to go that deep, but I didn't realize this could be triggering for certain people if you've had traumatizing things around religion or sex and things like that. So I think across the board, if we're talking about something that's pretty heavy, we should kind of talk about it.
Agreed.
You know? Yeah,
Totally
just kind of give that hey, this might bring up subconscious memories from your childhood, and it might mean that you need to deal with them,
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I think spirituality is huge for our generation.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like now more than ever, our whole entire world is just completely starting to awaken and open up to the idea of spiritual practices a lot more than the traditional sense of religion that we all grew up around.
Mm-hmm.
So the more and more that we can get into that, and the more and more that we can peel back the layers to get back to the core of what we are as humans, the better it is.
For sure. And if you want to get into it a little bit, but 2012, everyone thought that the world was going to end, but the shift in consciousness just started. And if you really think about, since December 21st, 2012, shit started changing a lot.
Yeah.
And in astrology, that was a huge turning point for just where we were, where we're heading as how we're changing. I don't know. I don't have the words for it, but it's really true. If you look into it, there's a distinct transit that happened with the alignment and everything, and the Mayans thought that the world was ending, but an old way of life was just changing. We transitioned into something new in 2012, and since then, if you look at the evolution of even the internet and how we have changed drastically in the past 8 years, it's insane.
Hyperspeed. Everything's
dude,
quadrupled and multiplied and gone so much faster.
Yeah, so I think people just the light bulb went off, and people are oh shit, I understand that we can be contacted, and I don't know, people are just awakening, like you said.
Yeah.
So I'm so stoked to kind of get into certain topics about all of this type of stuff. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's so much for us to talk about in there, and there's so many different avenues that each of us can both get into for our own journeys.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
It's very good.
How did you originally get into spirituality?
Ooh, okay. Briefly, I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
Dun, dun, dun. Coming from the Northeast, my parents are both Italian, and heavily, they were raised Catholic, so they just knew that was tradition to raise me that way. Mm-hmm. And I went through communion, confirmation, you name it, I did it. Confession when I was 7, that was a good time. I'll definitely talk about that at some point. But yeah, I think I was raised in a spiritual light, even though it didn't seem real, God was this fearful object, but I kind of understood from a young age that my parents were undeveloped in that area. So once I got old enough, I was like, oh, like I can have my own relationship with like higher you know, like a higher spirit or whoever, like God, I guess, is who I referred to for a long time. So, yeah, like I was very aware spiritually from a very young age, and I went through like a lot of death when I was like 10 and under, so that made me grow a lot. And yeah, so I think once I was like 20, I kind of got out of like a religion-based like structure, and I started developing like ideas for myself, and it was really good. I feel like I was able to kind of rely on my own intuition a little bit more, and after that, like the past like 6 years, I've been really kind of going off of like how I feel and realizing that like no one can tell me what is right and what is wrong, and kind of unlearning a lot of patterns that I learned growing up. And yeah, it's just been like a huge growing experience. Like my mom would talk about astrology, and I've been like picking at like things from my grandparents that I didn't know. Like my dad told me that my grandma, so his mom used to do like tarot readings and like would do astrology readings on like her neighborhood block. And I never met her because like my dad lost her when he was 23. So she was like long past and before I was like even born. But like I feel like I kind of inherited that like that witchiness.
That vibe.
So yeah, for sure. I feel like she's like fully me sometimes, and he'll even say like, you are so much like my mom, which is cool. Wow. Because like I didn't know her, you know, but like just to know that she was into like more taboo like spirituality is so cool.
The
so
woo stuff that we're actually starting to see,
especially
is not so
in the
woo-woo.
fucking 70s, like that's not as, it wasn't as cool then as it is now, you know. So yeah, it's cool to kind of
collectively it seems like all of our generation and like all of the world is starting to accept a lot more of the stuff that we used to make fun of as like woo woo as the stuff that like might actually have some substance now. Right,
because now it's becoming like a trend to understand that things that were like all we had, like say like 300, 400 years ago, like that was like real shit. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
like
absolutely.
We weren't controlled by like government and like religion at that point. So now it's all coming back because we have the knowledge with the internet and like being able to believe what we want and not being like structured in these like religions. So I don't know. It's been like a huge journey the past like 6 or 7 years. Once I realized like that my parents didn't even know what they believed, that I was like, why am I following what they told me the past like, you know, 18, 19 years? Like I need to develop my own idea of what I believe. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's just like
that's
a
awesome.
rundown of like kind of how I've developed since I was a kid. But like, I don't know, everyone's journey is different, and I have some friends that like do follow, you know, everyone has those people that like follow religion, or if they're just like pursuing their own thing. Like at this point in time, I don't think anyone should identify as one thing, because if you have your own opinion and your own experiences, you can't say that you're like this one way and I only follow this because the Bible says, or because I follow this. You can put any like religion in it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're all having our own experiences. So
especially too, to say like at such a young age that you're like, this is the only way, this is the way that I'm gonna be for the rest of my life, this is the only thing that makes sense. But if you haven't given yourself enough time to like really explore other things and other avenues, how can you possibly say that that's the only way? Like you don't even know any better.
You have no idea.
Yeah. So like learn, explore, see things, get to know things before you like set in stone that you're going to be this way for the rest of your life.
Definitely. And like have faith in like your own spiritual path instead of being like, I have faith in this one thing. Like there's no confirmation in that, you know? Yeah. So
absolutely.
That's where I'm at now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How about you? Like where did you kind of come from, and kind of give like a brief like description of like how you developed, or if there was like an individual pinpoint that you remember that like changed you.
Okay. Well, I grew up very Christian household. Family used to go to church all the time. Every Sunday we were involved. We did that. And then over, I don't know, maybe around like my teenage years or a little bit before my teenage years, things changed, got away from the church. Parents like did their own thing. And then I was kind of like just in limbo, like being a young teenager. Like I didn't really have any spiritual direction. It wasn't the most important thing to me at the time, other than like playing video games. So I met a girl at the time. I think I was like 12 or 13 years old, and she was Christian. She was very Christian, and she kind of like got me back in like going to church and like Christianity, and like it was cool at the time, but it was just something that I was just kind of like doing. So when we broke up, throughout like the rest of my teenage years, that's when I started like kind of getting a little bit more of an open mind to some things. I had a few psychedelic experiences that kind of opened my mind up to the fact that there might be more out there than what we believe to be true. And then around the time I think I was 18 or 19, I got reconnected with that same girl again, and I got super, super, super involved in like Christianity and the church and things of that nature. So much so to the point that like I was like, maybe I'll be a pastor. Maybe I might do something like that. And if anyone knows me now, like that's the complete opposite of who I am now. So I went through that journey, and then I had a very, very, very strong, insightful psychedelic experience.
Very.
About 2 or 3 weeks later, ended my relationship with that person and decided that I was ready to just start exploring what was inside of me more. And I realized that there was just way more for me to learn before I could set in stone that I was going to be a certain way for the rest of my life.
Wow.
So ever since then, in combination with other things, I've like read books. I've gotten really into my own like personal growth and my personal journey. And only recently I started getting into astrology thanks to you and someone else that I was talking to. And I used to make fun of people who were like super into astrology, but now it's like I literally just got a tattoo on my arm that represents my sun sign. So
that's so cool.
I'm a little into it now, you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we're both kind of digging into the depths of what astrology means, because a lot of people are like, oh, that's bullshit, because it's like horoscope based, and like,
yeah, and horoscopes are bullshit.
They are, because that was just like a selling point, as most things are with you know, anything. I think, I don't know how to put this without like offending people, but if there's a way to like make money off of letting people feel like connected, they're gonna do it. Like if it's like religion or astrology, it's like, oh, like we can get people like to pay attention to this because we're saying like this is how they are. And that's how it all started, you know what I mean? Like, let's structure people into like thinking that this is what they are. Like, I don't know, I think religion was like a way to conform people to not have an expanded mind,
control the masses.
Yes, that's what it was.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I mean, I want to do so much more research before we get into like depth in this, but like Catholicism was like hugely like such a way to control the masses and like fear, like instill fear in people to not be like destructive or like do what they wanted, you know. And we've evolved a lot since then, so it's like just this is the best time to be living.
Oh my gosh, I know. All the information and all the resources that we have, all the things we're able to learn, the stuff that we can find in books. Like I've read some incredible stuff in some books that have literally like completely flipped my entire worldview upside down and made me think that everything I've ever learned is completely untrue.
Yeah.
And like, not saying that I know the answer, but I just, I'm a lot more open-minded and I'm questioning a lot more stuff now. And there's so many more possibilities available to me about where we could actually be coming from and what our spirituality truly is. It's just hard for me to like, I don't know. There's just too many things we don't know.
Yeah. And I think that is one thing that like we are very vulnerable with, is the unknowing. People that are open spiritually are just like, okay, like we're developing right now. We don't have all the answers, and like no one has lived in this time period yet. And like, regardless of the religion you follow, there is a certain extent that you need to understand that like no one has paved the way for this culture yet.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to trust yourself and your own intuition and like understanding that the universe or God is like guiding you, and there's not going to be an answer in the book for how to navigate right now.
Yeah.
Like you have to be able to follow who you are before you look to someone else or I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of control in that to manipulate people, and I needed to get away from that really badly. So, because I have a hard time like sticking up for myself, and that's something I'm trying to develop now, like in my 20s, and it goes back to a lot of like childhood patterns and just like parental views, and I don't know, there's a lot of like what is it, like not unlearning, but like I'm starting to look at my childhood from like a third person view, and like seeing why I'm so mute sometimes, or why I feel like really anxious when I try to stick up for myself. So
interesting.
I think
so like figuring out like what from your childhood has like shaped you into who you are now.
Yeah, because there's a lot of parts of me when I'm put on the spot of being like about my sexuality or something, like I start to like break out in hives, or I just get like really hot, and I feel like I'm not supposed to be talking about certain things. And I think that all links to who I feel like who I am spiritually. Like the confidence isn't there yet, and I'm working on it, and it's cool that I understand it. But
and we're both in our 20s, so we have so much time.
Yeah, it's kind of good to feel
people that are in
like
like their
now.
50s and 60s and 70s that have literally been like believing the same thing that they were taught when they were like kids, haven't even had a single
Our
opportunity
parents.
to think otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's like we're so I don't know, we're so self-aware, but we're pretty self-aware about like where we're at, what the possibilities are, and we just know that there's a million different ways that we can take the rest of our lives spiritually, and whatever comes our way is going to come our way. There's nothing set in stone. Right.
There's just like I said earlier, like a vulnerability there spiritually. There's like no knowing. So do you feel like astrology has helped you understand who you are?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, 1,000 times. So like when I used to like make fun of people for like astrology, and like still to this day, like most of my friends would be like, oh, astrology's a bunch of bullshit, like whatever, like, but they don't know anything past like their sun sign. Yeah. They don't know anything about their birth chart, so of course they don't believe in astrology. So when I started understanding like my rising sign, my moon sign, my Venus, my Mars, my Mercury, all of these things, and I was seeing all these correlations that like really explained to me like who I actually was, like extremely in-depth explanations. Like I remember the day we sat down and we read through like what each of my things were, and it was so cool. Mind-blowing. And like knowing that, and then knowing like other people's like signs, like their entire birth chart signs, like if you know someone else's moon sign, you completely understand how they are emotionally.
Oh, for sure.
So it's like
everyone, just a side note, if you know someone's moon sign, that rules their emotional well-being or how they react on emotions. So you should identify people with who they are by their moon and not their sun, because everybody is just so like on point with their moon usually, and not. Sometimes absolutely. People are like, oh, you don't seem like an Aquarius, but I'm like, yeah, but like
I have 11
I'm a fucking
other
Gemini for sure. Like, which is cool. Like, it just, if you start to realize, like what you're saying is like, once you start to understand the energies that are involved in the different planets, like, and you go in depth of what astrology is, like you start to realize that it's so personal. And that's what I try to get across to people is like, your Venus placement is not going to be the same other than like people that were born at the same exact time as you were on this earth. And that is just so significant, like in the same hospital to that point. Like you have to pinpoint the same location to get the same natal chart in a sense. And like, I just love like letting people see that like this is a chart, it looks like a clock, and like obviously if you're listening to this, like you can do some research on it, and I want to talk about it on this podcast, but like think of the, you know, like a clock, like there's 12 hours, there's 12 houses, so no one is gonna look the same as you unless you're born at like the same exact time. And I have a few good friends that are twins, and I've been like exploring like the difference in their personalities, and like, I mean, you could just go really, there's a fucking rabbit hole. But like when we talked about it, like I remember that day when I was like, your Venus rules your love and your affection and how you're caring, and like your Mars rules, you know, the masculine and like the lust, the like how you react like in sex, like with like passion, and like it's a different type of, it's the masculine and feminine. And then you have your Jupiter that rules like your luck and fortune in this life. And then you start to realize that all of these different planets mean, and whatever sign they are in for you is so individual, you know? It's like, hey, like you looked at the sky and say each planet rules a different part of how your life is going to go right now.
Yeah.
And what I love about it is like you can start to search, like if you want to know who you were in a past life or where you came from, like you can kind of figure that out based on your chart. So
yeah,
I don't know, it's just really cool.
it's crazy.
You can start to
there's
like,
so many things. And like my favorite thing about that too is like, if you know, like at my work, I know everyone's sign, and everyone that's in my life, I know everyone's sign.
that's so cool.
And like the best part about that is like it gives you a basic impression about how their energy is and how they are as a person. So it's like I know like if you're like a Virgo, for example, like you like order, you like structure, you like to get things done, you have a very specific way you like to do things. If you're a Gemini or a Sagittarius, you're probably super outgoing, you're great at conversation, know what you like, know what you don't like, know the best way to like interact with you to like work around that. And so like knowing each person's sign, it just it's almost like reading body language in a way. Like it's just another language.
That is very similar to that.
It's just another way to like read and understand someone, and also to help and improve your interaction with that person. So
For sure.
believe in astrology or not, like if you understand it and you start to look into it more, it really makes a difference on your personal relationships.
Yeah, it definitely does, and it personalizes like who you are and who you connect with. So do you feel like, what's like one spiritual practice that has like changed your life right now, or you're currently working on?
I would say the biggest thing for me that I notice makes the most difference, other than like reading books, it would be meditation and visualization. And meditation, I don't know why, but like every single time that I've devoted consistent time over an extended period of time to like meditating 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, everything, literally every other aspect of my life just improves. Like
really?
I'm
So
more
cool.
clear-minded, more social, getting more things done, more productive, less distracted. Like my whole life just is better when I'm doing that. And then when I'm visualizing, my top book recommendation, the best book I've ever read out of like 30 books I've read, would be Psycho-Cybernetics. It talks all about the power of visualization. So
ooh, I need to read that.
Highly recommend. But
That's
yes.
so cool.
What about you?
I think when I give myself like a time gap, like of 2 or 3 hours, I'll start with like yoga and like kind of calming down from the day. I like to practice between like 4 and 7 p.m. And then I'll get into like a tarot spread and just kind of like ask my like spiritual guides like something that I need to hear for the day. Or, you know, you can get it, like if you're into tarot, you can get into like extensive like spreads and start asking questions. And it's pretty much like a tool to communicate with either, you know, angels or people that have passed in your life, or, you know, like God or whoever you believe in, I guess. So that's been my biggest like tool spiritually, is just like being able to communicate with that like other realm. And it sometimes takes a really long time. Like that's why I wouldn't recommend like 10 to 15 minutes, because I like to sit there and like get my body morphed into the present, which is with yoga. And then I like let my mind settle in and, you know, maybe do some breath work and things like that with meditation. You need to let your body like sink into the moment. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I feel like that's probably like the most simple way of like introducing that. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, I feel
That's
like it's
great.
good. So
We definitely have so much more to talk about with this, for sure.
yeah, I feel like this was a good intro.
Definitely,
for sure.
definitely. I mean, I think one of our biggest topics would definitely be our experience with religion as we continue on with this. Of course, astrology. That's the basis of our name and why we are the Air Fresheners.
Yeah.
And then also too, like books that we've read and stuff like that. But we have plenty more episodes coming on
Yeah,
this
I'm
stuff.
excited. And I'm like really looking forward to what other people have to say about this episode.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
definitely let us know. Subscribe, all that bullshit.
Yep.
All
But
right.
thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you. Goodbye.